If you were raised in a church like I was, tithing was taught all the time. We were told you give 10% of your gross, God will open up the windows of heaven and he will pour you out a blessing that there wasn't room to contain. But what does the Bible actually say a tithe is? And the first thing I want you to understand, a tithe was a law. So if you believe in following a tithe, you believe in following the law. And what does Paul write about following the law? He says, if you follow the law, you got to follow it all. And you're basically doing away with the grace. So if you believe in tithing, the first thing I want you to understand is that that is law that does away with grace. Well, the first tithe was called the Levitical tithe. It was 10% of your income, 10% of the animals, 10% of your produce, your wine and your oil was given to the priest because they weren't taking salaries and they couldn't own land. So you were supporting the priests who were supporting you by going to you for God. And then everything was in a 7-year cycle. So in years 1, 2, 4, and 5, there was a festival tithe. So what you did is you took a tenth to the church and you would actually get to participate in some of that tithe. You would give to the priest, but there's also a portion came back to you and you celebrated. But here's an interesting thing. The blood and the fat was always given to God. That was always his. Now, year in 3 and 6, you would do away with that festival tithe and you would give a tithe to support the poor and the needy and the travelers. So year 3 and 6, you gave a tithe for the poor. So you were giving 20%. It wasn't just 10, it was 20. Now here's an interesting fact. In year 7, you didn't give a tithe because God said, let the land rest. But here's an interesting thing that they would do with that land on the 7th year. Land would just naturally produce stuff, leftover grains and fruits and things like that. That was like a free-for-all. Anybody could come and get that. Strangers, travelers, workers, the landowner, they could go and get that stuff. But in year 7, you didn't pay the tithe. So I want to get into other studies later about the false teachings of what a tithe will produce in your life. But we needed to start with what the Bible actually said a tithe was. The most important thing about what I want you to understand is the tithe was law, not grace.